Hello and welcome! In this video I will build and paint French World War II infantry miniatures from Wargames Atlantic in 28mm scale. I'm Andy and you are watching ModTop. The figures come as a multi-part kit and the box is labeled as French infantry from 1916 to 1940. I was surprised and my first thoughts were that the gear of the miniatures is completely wrong for 1940. But after a further research, I found out that I was wrong and that several units still wore this old World War I gear in 1940. Even if the majority of the French troops in the Blitzkrieg era did wear more modern equipment. The kit contains 2 different sprues and each of them 5 times. The larger sprue contains 7 different bodies and a multitude of different heads. There are heads with Adrian helmets, with and without gas masks, and heads with cappies. Also backpacks for the First World War, rifles, machine guns, and lots of other weapons and bits. The smaller sprue then contains heads for colonial troops and weapons and equipment for 1940. If I look at the sprues, I would say that you can not only build French troops from 1916 onwards out of the figures, but that you could also certainly make the colorful uniforms from 1914 out of them. In addition, many troops from the interwar period and the colonial wars up to and including 1940 or 41. Even if for sure not all details on the miniatures are 100% correct. For this video I glued together 3 sample figures. I used a little bit of filler around the arms and I added paper strips for the rifle slings. The World War I rifles have these, the World War II rifles lack them. In my opinion, this is a small thing that enhances the figures with minimal effort. Before I started painting, the figures got an olive green primer from a spray can. I used one from Plastic Soldier Company because I had it on hand. The first color I use is US Field Grab from Vallejo. This color gives a nice dark dull brown color after shading. I use this to paint the figure's wool coat and one of the trousers. The idea is to try out different shades of brown on the soldier's pants. I looked at some museum pieces of French uniforms and contemporary color photos, and also the pieces all had the dark brown color in common. There was a certain variety of colors. And I would like to show that at least a little bit with the figures. Another one of the soldiers gets his pants painted with German camo pale brown. Now in retrospect, I can say that this is also a very good color for the coats if someone wants them to be a little browner compared to the US field wraps that I used. The third of the soldiers gets his pants painted green-brown. This is the color that is used in many tutorials as a base color for the French uniform. I have tested this in the past and to be honest, the color is too yellow for me. I prefer a duller shade of brown that is closer to the original uniform colors to this variant. But I think they are fine as an option for trousers. I paint the soldier's backpack in tan yellow. Because of the dark primer, one layer is not enough, but with 2 thin coats you get good coverage. I use the former green-brown again for the gaiters. All sorts of colors are possible, especially for the gaiters. Here you can use the light khaki from Vallejo as well as the dark brown tone of the uniforms. I choose the middle ground and used green-brown. French soldiers wore dark brown lace-up shoes and that's why the figures get a bit of chocolate brown on their shoes. But here again, every other dark brown is just as good as this one. Next I paint all the leather, the belt and the cartridge pouches. These were available in a variety of colors. When these leather items are new, they have a slightly reddish or yellowish tone, but as they get older, these things get darker. And since these miniatures were the M1916 leather equipment from the First World War, I choose a darker color, mahogany brown. The rifle sling will also be mahogany brown, but I will only paint it after the rifle itself. An important thing about the French backpacks is that the edges of these were also trimmed with dark leather. So we must not forget that either. For the fabric cover of the water bottles, I again use the German camo pale brown that I already used on a pair of trousers. I paint the breadback and the strap with German camo beige. Another color with German in the name, and that's for French soldiers from 1940. If this continues, I will have a bad conscience and I think I will have to rethink my color palette. Let's take a somewhat more neutral color now, black. I paint the bayonet scabbards with black. I paint all the wooden parts of the rifles with beige brown. My soldiers carry Berthier rifles, and if you search for them on the internet, you will find a wide range of different wood tones for them too. I also decided on a medium tone here because the rifles were no longer brand new in 1940 and the stocks were certainly darkened a bit. At least I suspect so. Next I use black-gray to represent the bluing of the metal parts of the weapons. Metal parts on military weapons actually always appear more black than silver, and black-gray fits it quite well. At the very end we will add a few metallic highlights. In between I paint the hair, at least what you can see under the helmets. To do this, I simply mix a few of the many brown tones that I still have on my painting palette. I won't treat the hair any further, even after the later wash, because you can hardly see it anyway. Okay, now it's finally time for the rifle slings that I left out before. As already mentioned with the leather equipment, my chosen color for it is mahogany brown. Now there isn't much left and the basic colors are ready. I paint all skin areas with beige red. With a bit of skin color on the hands and faces, the figures appear much more human. As the last base color before the wash, I paint all remaining metal parts with olive gray. A whole range of colors is also possible for this. I found Adrian helmets that were painted almost brown, and a whole range of olive tones are also possible. I mainly based myself on a color photo by Hugo Jäger, a German war correspondent, who took a picture of French colonial soldiers in 1940 and which shows helmets that are very dark in color compared to the uniform. In addition to the helmets, I also painted the small cups on the drinking bottles with olive gray. Afterwards, it is important to give the miniatures some time to dry. It would really be a shame if we were to dissolve the underlying layers of color again with the acrylic wash that I'm about to apply. I used the brown Agrax Earth shade from Citadel as a wash for these figures. With lighter colors I would definitely wear it down a bit, but with all the dark brown tones for the French, I brushed it on straight from the pot. I intentionally use too much wash so that it doesn't dry in places when I spread it. Then I spread it generously with the brush and make sure that I really get into all the recesses. And wherever puddles form, I pick up the wash with the brush. In order not to get unsightly stains, it always helps to briefly dip the brush in a little water beforehand. I spread the excess wash into a kitchen towel to clean the brush and do the whole thing until I like the figure. Then everything has to dry thoroughly again. When the wash is dry, I paint the highlights. I start by brushing a bit of the olive grey over the helmets. I don't actually paint the helmets, it's more like dry brushing with a base color. Next I take the backpacks and paint the edges and all the raised folds in the base color tan yellow. Especially with such bright colors, it creates a pretty good contrast to the areas treaded by wash. But I don't highlight all the leather things again with the base color. Instead, I use the color New Wood. This is a little lighter and yellower, and in my opinion goes perfectly with the mahogany brown to represent worn leather. All leather straps and ammunition pouches get a few highlights with it, and of course the rifle slings. For the bread bags, I use the basic color German camo beige again. Here too, just a few strokes along the edges to emphasize the strap and to highlight a few folds. I use green-brown to paint the lights on one pair of pants that I had previously painted with this color. And I also paint all the gaiters. If someone wants stronger contrast, a second highlight with khaki would be possible. However, I like it more simple and subtle, and I'm happy with one highlight. I also paint the next pair of pants with the base color again. This time with German camo pale brown. Because of all the pants painting, I unfortunately missed using it to highlight the drinking bottles. So if someone wants to save time, it's easier to paint the water bottle covers in this color right now. I still have one pair of pants left, and this gets, you guessed it, a few highlights in US field rep. And all the uniform coats now get a few strokes of color. You can simply follow the folds on the clothing. Simply highlight all the raised areas. Afterwards, I mixed the US field wrap with some German camo beige and only added a few light points on the most elevated areas, for example on the shoulder boards. It was really just 3 or 4 small lines or dots for each miniature. Next, the wooden gun parts get a few highlights with beige brown. Here I paint the highest parts and add a few more strokes as a wood grain. As already mentioned, I had previously forgotten to paint the drinking water bottles, or rather the fabric covers for them, so I'm doing that now. Just a few strokes along the seams. To highlight the helmets a bit and make them look a little more worn, and to finally use a color with French in the name, they are lightly dry brushed with Highlight French Tank Crew from Vallejo Panzer Aces. Next I paint the skin tones. For this I take the beige red again and paint all the larger skin areas with it. I leave out the edges and recesses, so we already have the first highlight layer. At the same time as the beige red, I also had some basic skin tone on the painting palette. I mixed the two colors about 50-50 and then painted the next lighter areas with them. For example, the fingers, ears, mouth, eyebrows, cheekbones, nose, and so on. And finally, I used the basic skin tone pure to create the clearest highlights. I even had a much lighter shade on the palette, but I didn't use it because I already liked the skin tone. After the skin tones had dried, I helped a little bit with the hairdryer. I used Apothecary White. This is a citadel contrast color, which means the opacity is reduced like a glaze. With this we create a beard shadow on the figures. Therefore, only the lower part of the face and the cheeks up to the sideburns receive a very small part of this color. This gives a very nice effect and makes the rosy faces look a little more real. Lastly, on the faces, I take a small drop of red and dilute it quite a bit with water, so that a very watery magenta is created. I then only paint the lower lip with this glaze. This gives the whole face a little more color. But be careful, only paint the lower lip. If you hit the upper lip, it looks like the soldier is wearing lipstick. And another very small detail, the French infantry wore small dark blue regimental numbers and 2 chevrons on the tips of the collars. Many items of clothing had extra tabs attached to cover them up, but I will still paint them on. So I just paint a small chevron on each collar with the point pointing up in dark blue color. Lastly, I take oily steel and use it to paint a few highlights on the dark metal parts of the rifles. Now I will treat the figures with some mud varnish to protect them and make some earth and grass on the bases. And finally, my French infantry soldiers for 1940 are finished. I hope you enjoyed this video and you found something useful for you and your own models. If so, please like and subscribe, that helps me a lot. Any questions or anything, feel free to drop them in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching and see you next time.